Revelation 2806. From the 9th and the 10th of July 1943. Inquiry of the mind. Working of the mind. Heart. The spiritual kingdom can never be entered by research, nor can the knowledge of spiritual things be received by school. And the reason for this is that the heart must be active in order to fathom knowledge and truth, otherwise neither can be imparted to it. Spiritual knowledge has nothing to do with worldly knowledge. Indeed, even the person with little worldly knowledge will be far more receptive to spiritual knowledge because it is announced to him through the voice of the Spirit, which only sounds in the heart and is heard all the more easily the less resistance it is opposed by intellectual knowledge, which usually rebels against spiritual knowledge. The intellect is exposed to all influences. Both good and bad forces seek to assert themselves, and that is why it is full of wisdom, which, however, need not always be truth. It is human wisdom which fills the thinking of the human being who has only gained such intellectually. But only the working of the Spirit in the human being offers a guarantee for pure truth. Consequently, divine wisdom does not come from outside but from within, from the heart, and can therefore only be heard when the human being contemplates within himself. But truth never approaches him from outside unless the bearer of truth has been taught by God himself, that is, the Spirit of God has come alive in him. It would now be wrong to deny every worldly researcher the knowledge of truth, just as, conversely, a person taught by God's Spirit can also have great worldly knowledge if spiritual knowledge was striven for first, and God therefore provides him with spiritual and earthly knowledge. Then he will only grant access to knowledgeable beings, and they will also consider him in accordance with the truth, both spiritually and earthly. However, he must also utilize the spiritual knowledge towards his fellow human beings, otherwise it cannot expand if the spiritual knowledge is the result of unselfish activity of love for his neighbor. Therefore, every intellectual researcher must at the same time fulfill the commandment of neighborly love in order to penetrate a knowledge which cannot be gained purely intellectually. People do not want to accept this because it is incomprehensible to them that thoughts are born in the heart, that therefore thinking, feeling and wanting are decisive as far as thoughts move in spiritual areas. Only a person whose feelings and intentions are good and noble, who is therefore able and willing to love, can think rightly, that is truthfully. For his thoughts are guided by the Spirit in him, which, however, can only work in a loving person. But the Spirit in the human being receives truth from the Spirit outside of him, which is God's emanation of love, which therefore knows everything because it is divine, whereas the human being who lives without love cannot partake of this emanation of God's love, and his thoughts are merely the transmissions of ignorant forces as soon as they touch spiritual areas or the function of the thinking organs where earthly questions are only solved. And such results can and will always be disputed because the human being as such can always, love and truth cannot be separated from each other, because both are divine and therefore cannot be thought of without each other. Love, however, is part of the heart, consequently truth can also only be born in the heart. It must be felt and also recognized as truth by the heart, then received and thought through by the intellect, and thus remain as mental property of the human being. But the intellectual man broods and researches and seeks to dissect everything. His heart remains mute and unfeeling as long as he is not lovingly active, and then he comes to conclusions which are completely erroneous, but he seeks to prove them again with wrong mental results. He is convinced of the correctness of his conclusions, only to doubt them again when another intellectual researcher has arrived at different results and again represents them as the only correct ones. The Spirit out of God, however, gives simple and clearly understandable explanations which are so plausible to the human being if he stands in love. He knows no doubts because his heart, His being capable of love also brings him the power of knowledge, and the explanations of the Divine Spirit are understandable and therefore credible to him. He knows that he walks in truth. He also knows that this truth can never be refuted, that it always and forever remains the same, because the truth from God is eternally unchanging, just as God, as the giver of truth, also remains unchanging for eternity. Amen.